Hey guys, happy to be here. My name is Elias. I'm a co-founder of Kakarot. We're doing ZK work in the Ethereum space, and this talk is just my contribution to the sequencing day. It's not going to be too technical, but it's just a rant about how I think the last months in roll-up space we talked way too much about finality, and it's not something that touches the users at all. I'm looking at Toggle right now. So what users want is 250 millisecond confirmation time, or they want Web2 experience, and they do not care about the underlying security. What I say they will care about is whether a confirmation that showed a green tick under a second gets cancelled or reverted or denied at some point. So my nuance to this slide is to say, as long as your confirmation time is within a second, and then the probability of your transaction disappearing from the internet is low enough, your user is going to be happy. So today, I'm taking the example of Arbitrum One. I am not affiliated to them. But today, to do a swap on Arbitrum, it takes under a second. So the UX is here. That's just my first point. We have fast confirmation time. It's not finality, but it is UX. And as a user, confirming within 1 second is awesome. So just, can this transaction be reverted? Like, can it be erased in terms of states change? Yes, but do you care? No. So let's just settle on terms right now before we go further. Finality is reached when state change caused by your transaction is irreversible. So your transaction is first submitted to a wallet, or RPC, a mempool, order flow. It's included in a block, but then in many different blockchains, in many different consensus and systems, it's not because you're included in a block that's mined that the state you touched is irreversible. So in Ethereum L1, this idea of finality, this idea that whatever transaction you made, if I sent to a Purv in the crowd 1,000 ETH on Ethereum, even though my transaction can be included in the block in 12 seconds, it will take 12 minutes for me to reach absolute certainty that the state is irreversible. What does it mean? It means that basically if I'm selling him my car, I should give him the keys to my car after 12 minutes, not 12 seconds. Otherwise he's going to drive off and I will never have my car if I'm reorged. Okay, so let's take the example of Arbitrum because we took it once. So what is the time to finality of your transaction? Who votes for 250 milliseconds? Who votes for 12 minutes? Who votes for 7 days? Okay, so it's 7 days. What does it mean in practice? Whoa, sir. I'm seeing Luca Dono from L2Beat getting agitated in the crowd. I will not take answers from him. No, I'm kidding. So I believe that it is 7 days in the sense that your transaction, when it is done on an optimistic rollup, the state that it touches on, it is vulnerable to challenges for 7 days. I will not let you take a picture of this. No, I'm kidding. You can take it. No, I'm kidding. All right, so deep diving, because maybe it's just semantics. This is Arbitrum. You can replace it by Optimism, Base, Manta, Mental. It's the same construct, which is an optimistic rollup. What happens from the user's perspective? You send your transaction, and you're going to get an L2 pre-confirmation that your transaction is going to be included in the block. Your transaction is submitted to L1 after a few minutes, as it is batched by the proposer. And the proposes a new state for your optimistic rollup. And then there is the challenge window, which is open, which can be 7 days, 3.5 days for optimism. It can be more in case your fraud proof system is different. But there are this amount of days whereby if there is malicious activity or even just an attack on your fraud proof system, your transaction can be erased. Cannot be erased. The state state change caused by your transaction can be erased. Okay, so are users satisfied? I think they're satisfied for as long as there doesn't exist a high probability of reversing the state. So in the last 2 or 3 years of Optimism being in prod, I do not recall any challenges being submitted. To be fair, it took them a while to get to prod with regards to their fraud-proof system, but let's just take Arbitrum. To the best of my knowledge, the fraud-proof system has never been used. What it means in practice is that Arbitrum has 500 million blocks a year. What it means is that since for the last 3 years, a user has never had their state being reversed. What it means is that in practice, the 250 millisecond confirmation time acted as finality because everything went well. Okay, so who really cares? I think L2 bridges and also just risk analysts. This whole idea that 7-day finality is not something that people care about is true to some extent, for as long as you don't have a lot of entanglement between chains and states. I'll touch on this a bit, and then we'll also see how our rollup ecosystem is kind of hedging against this, but you're guessing right, is interrupt system inside the superchain or like inside Arbitrum are ways to kind of circumvent the very big problem in which if you have tons of interop and cross-chain communication between many chains that have 7-day to finality, and you are a very, I would say, high on volume financial system, you can get billions of dollars of risk with regards to reversing. So we can take the worst example, which is probably having tons of message passing between Optimism and Arbitrum. So if you're bridging tons of funds between Optimism and Arbitrum with an intent bridge, who here has already bridged funds from different L2s, between L2s? Well, that's a lot. So I suspect correctly that not many people are using the canonical bridge, right? Everyone is using fast bridges. So when you're doing this, essentially you're pushing the risk of the finality to the solvers or to the LPs that are the liquidity providers to those intent bridges. So it's fine on small sums, and to some extent, all the solvers or like all the people who bear the risk run full nodes. So they make sure that the transactions can really never be reversed. But this is in the happy case where there is never an attack on a fraud-proof system. Later on, when chains are stage 2, and then it doesn't even, a state being reversed doesn't even have to be linked to just false state roots, but it can be linked to an attack on a fraud-proof system. You're no longer protected from 7 days of history just being erased. We can come back to this. I think it's quite technical in the questions, but you would get this intuition after reading Fraud-Proof Wars article from L2Bit. So how do we actually shorten the time to finality? Option 1, ZK rollups. I think you shorten time to finality because you eliminate the fraud-proof challenge period, at which point your time to finality is between a few hours and a few minutes. In the best case, it is the time it takes you to generate a proof plus the 12 minutes of L1. And in the worst case, depending on like what is your definition of worst, it's a few hours the time it takes for aggregation to happen. So L2 pre-confirmation, let's take the example of Starknet. The sequencer gives you a pre-confirmation that your transaction is going to be included in under 2 seconds. The ZK proof is generated in a few minutes. And then the ZK proof is aggregated in a tree structure such that you only need to verify one single ZK proof on L1. This saves you millions of dollars per month. And then when this block is finalized on L1, you're good to go. Option 2, you shorten the L1 block time. Shorter slot, shorter epoch, shorter time to finality. I guess this has been announced by Justin Drake, I think a few days ago, that he's pushing for L1 shorter block time. So it is one way to shorten the time to finality, because to some extent, even 6 minutes is still too long if you're hoping for bigger financial structures to arrive on L2s and L1. You would ideally want some kind of construct that gives you instant finality. Instant finality. So takeaways, User experience, like from the user standpoint, I think even like when we go to conference, like when we are as researchers or other people in conferences and we talk to users, I don't think they should be exposed to the concept of finality, except if they bear lots of risk with regards to bridging a lot of funds or if they're very technical. I think this is equivalent to ZK as a concept. It's interesting for people who want to get nerd sniped and dig in the rabbit hole. But at the end of the day, let's take the example of OP Stack switching to ZK, which is what I believe they'll do in a year or two. Users will never know. Users won't be affected. You could argue that users who use the canonical bridge will bridge faster, but most of people just use fast bridges like across or whoever. So rollup state finality depends on L1 finality and the challenge period. So if you're a big economic actor, you might have to look at actually the finality time as a way to choose your rollup. One good example of this is ENS. Who here knows that ENS announced their L2? Okay, so if you have a name chain where all the ENS names are stored, if you are on Optimism and you want to read this state from name chain, you have to call L1, so Ethereum L1, you have to call the state root to get the name chain, like current state, and you have to check your name Elias.eth against this state root. So because of that, you need ideally name chain to have very, very short time to finality. Otherwise, you run into just problems of storage slots being either stale or reversed. So rollup state finality matters a lot when it comes to dApps, builders, and researchers. For users, it's really about UX. And then L2 block times are arbitrary. I think this is the last takeaway. It was hidden in some slides, but whenever an L2 such as Arbitrum says they have 250 milliseconds block time, it's just a construct that says we are doing pre-confirmations at the level of the block, which is fine. I think they did it really well because EVM tooling does not know about pre-confirmation, but they know about block. So the most straightforward way to make MetaMask very snappy was to reduce the block time to insane durations. So yeah, no one cares about finality except builders. And then I'll open up on this. 7 days is too slow, but 12 minutes is also too slow. And we built some temporary solutions to this, which is that instead of doing interrupt at the L1 layer, so you commit something to L1, you wait 12 minutes and you act on it, like deposit into the bridge. You are actually using pessimistic proofs, which allows you to compose states of many rollups using ZK proofs, and then use the aggregation layer to ensure atomicity. And I think you're seeing lots of the market converge to this, so Ag layer, Elastic Chain, Sharp from Starkware, and now I was at the Taiko talk and they announced Glue, what was it? Glue ZK proof processor, I forgot. It's called Glue, and to the best of my knowledge, it behaves exactly like an aggregation layer. So it seems as though every single cluster of chains of rollups are building their own interoperability layer, such to reduce these 12 minutes to seconds. So I think that's the end game, and then everyone is going to do their best to reach this as fast as possible with as little risk as possible. Yeah, shield slide. I forgot about this one. Kakarot is building ZK proofs, providing for EVM chains, and any L2, any L1 that wishes to switch to ZK, we'd love to talk to you. Thank you. Why do you not think Arbitrum has 7-day finality? It doesn't? Okay. But do you have a mic? Should I?
So, I've heard this misconception mostly from people from Starknet or ZK-Sync, because I think this misconception comes from the way that people think about state diffs rollups. It is true that in a state diff rollup, finality comes with the proof. Like when you post the output, you also need to post the state diff, because state diffs don't make sense without the proof because they're outputs. But if you're using transaction data as your input, and optimistic rollups can only use transaction data for data availability, right? You can have finality on the ordering of this data first, and then like the 7 days is just to about the output. So the thing is, when you if you you need to have finality on the ordering to propose an output. Because how can the proposer propose an output in an optimistic rollup if the ordering is not final on the transaction data? How can you design a challenge protocol if you don't know the ordering, hence the final state, right? So finality has to come, it's necessary for finality to come before the 7 days, because otherwise you wouldn't know what to challenge. And by the way, optimism, that's why at Altobit we built this finality page for this reason, to explain that optimistic rollup with transaction data have better finality than ZK rollups with state diffs. Optimism posts state roots after 1 hour, compared to the transaction data that it refers to, because it's enough, you already have finality. Actually, it's 1 hour is too much, but it could be less.
What you're saying is there are two definitions that kind of go around of finality. One is the transaction ordering is final, and the second is the state is final. So my point is that the first one is interesting if you're looking at differences between state diffs and transaction data. My point is that the second one is more important with regards to risk analysis, because even if the ordering is final, people only really care about the state.
So the thing is, when you want to use an intent bridge, the intent provider, liquidity provider, or whatever, if it waits 12 minutes for finality, they have no risk on bridging the funds. After finality, which is again 12 minutes in optimistic rollups, assuming no drift, they have no risk except if there is a bug in the bridge.
What if?
The bridge, when you calculate with your full node the final state of the bridge after the ordering is finalized, they will have guarantees that the state will not revert independent of all the challenges, except if there is a bug in the bridge. You should wait 7 days only if you're scared that there is a bug in the bridge.
Couldn't you also need to wait 7 days if the rollup is in stage 2 and then it gets attacked with exhaustion attack?
Of course.
But then if you're doing risk analysis as JP Morgan, you need to account for exhaustion attack risk.
Yes, but this also concerns ZK rollups.
I disagree.
I think another way of thinking about this is, so as soon as the transaction ordering has been committed into the L1, that ordering is final. There's no way of reorging it away. There's no way of changing the ordering of that transactions. And the state that those transactions produce is already final as well. The purpose of the L2 output settling to the L1 through the 7-day fault-proof challenge process is to render that state into the L1 execution environment so that it can trust it. But as an off-chain participant, for example, you can run OP nodes derivation logic yourself and derive that state from the batches as soon as they become final, as soon as those batches have become final on the L1.
So was there a question, or it was an assertion?
It's an assertion.
Yeah.
So just to double touch on this point, I do agree what you're saying, but isn't that for market-based bridging or LP-based bridging? If I'm JP Morgan, I want to withdraw my funds from Optimism and put it into Aave, I still need to wait for 7 days, right?
So if you're using canonical bridge?
Yeah, if I'm using the canonical bridge, I'm moving $1 billion from Arbitrum or Optimism, and I want to put it in Aave, I would still need to wait for the 7 days.
Yeah.
If it's an application within the L1 execution environment, yes, you have to wait 7 days to have a trusted state of the L2 inside the execution environment. But the actual ordering of the state, the finality of the state, has already been established well before the L1 execution environment is able to basically learn that it's been finalized.
Yes, I agree. But then, for this, you would need like market makers or like someone who has liquidity who can run that full node, assert the state himself, and then provide liquidity on the other side. So it's not that liquidity efficient, whereas something using like ZK is very liquidity efficient. Yeah, okay, yeah, same page.
We fixed everything. All the semantics debates have been solved today, officially.